I don't see myself as having a future. The doctor in the hospital couldn't help me. I have 2 children from 2 husbands. Both men are dead from AIDS. My family is poor, so what can I do? I'm just passing time until I die. The only thing that worries me is my children. What will happen to them? Who will take care of them?
Tens of millions of people in sub-Saharan Africa are suffering the same fate as Doris and Zima. Their lives are being completely destroyed by HIV. While the rampant sexually transmitted disease is destabilizing all aspects of African society, its most tragic consequence is the effect that it has had on African women and children. HIV, or the human immunodeficiency virus, is a sexually transmitted disease that attacks the body's immune system. HIV targets CD4 lymphocytes, whose job is to fight off viruses that have entered the body. HIV is able to defend itself in numerous ways against the body's attempts to eradicate it by mutating rapidly. This means that once a person is HIV positive, their immune system can never fully get rid of the virus. After someone first becomes HIV positive, it takes about 10 years for the infection to progress to what is known as AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. HIV is classified as AIDS when a person becomes seriously ill due to a weakened immune system, or when the number of CD4 cells in their body drops below a certain point. Today, doctors can slow the infection's progress, and with the right medication, an HIV-positive person can live for a long time without developing AIDS. Unfortunately, in underdeveloped countries, these medications are not readily available, and millions of people are still suffering and dying from AIDS. Sub-Saharan Africa is currently experiencing the world's largest AIDS crisis. With around 10% of the world's population, it is home to 25.8 million people with AIDS, over 60% of the HIV-positive people on Earth. In 2005 alone, 3.2 million African children and adults contracted HIV, and 2.4 million died from HIV-related causes. Overall of sub-Saharan Africa, around 7.5% of all adults are HIV positive. In 4 countries in southern Africa, Botswana, Swaziland, Lesotho, and Zimbabwe, the prevalence is much higher, with HIV rates as high as 38.8% of the population. If AIDS continues unchecked, the average life expectancy in Botswana will plummet to 27 years of age by 2010. This is a level not seen since the 19th century. The enormity of the AIDS pandemic is completely undermining and reshaping all aspects of African society. Most devastating, however, is the effect that AIDS has had on African people, especially the women and children. In sub-Saharan Africa, a woman is 30% more likely to be HIV positive than a man. Women are biologically about twice as likely as men to pick up AIDS during heterosexual sex. In addition, even today there is still much gender inequality in Africa. Women have very little say in their employment and education opportunities, and are less powerful in their choices of relationships than other women in other parts of the world. In African society, it is a social taboo for a woman to be unfaithful to her husband. However, it is expected that men will have extramarital affairs or use prostitutes. Sadly, this has led to the fact that most women contract HIV from their husbands. Due to their unequal say in sexual relationships, women are often unable to insist upon the use of condoms, even with their own husband. Ironically, in some African countries, young married women between the ages of 15 and 19 have higher HIV rates than unmarried sexually active women of the same age.
My husband infected me with the virus, I'm sure of it. Nobody else has ever touched me. After I tested positive, he left. He's not very far away from here, I know that. I also know that he has many girlfriends. All men do. That's what they're good at, nothing else. When a man decides to disappear, you can't force him to come back, ever.
Sadly, many women also contract HIV after being raped. South Africa has one of the highest sexual violence rates in the world. Rape often leaves girls not only emotionally scarred, but HIV positive as well. In addition, a myth persists in Africa that having sex with a virgin will cure AIDS. This tragic misinformation has led to an epidemic of rape of young girls by HIV positive men.
I was raped in Soweto, the township where I live. That's how I got the virus. At first I wanted to kill myself, but then I learned how to fight the pain inside of me. Today I counsel women who are raped too, who are HIV positive because of a crime against them. There are so many of us.
HIV is also spread when women and girls turn to prostitution in order to support themselves or their families. Prostitutes are at an extremely high risk for contracting HIV, as they are often not in a position to insist upon the use of condoms. Not only are these women in danger of getting AIDS, but if they are already HIV positive, they can pass the disease on to their customers. The extreme AIDS-related poverty in sub-Saharan Africa has transpired into a vicious cycle, as struggling women sell themselves for money only to further the spread of HIV.
I had a terrible youth. I grew up with my aunt. We were poor and desperate. She forced me to sleep with men in order to get money for food. I fell in love with one of them and had my first child. Today I have 6 children from 6 different husbands. The last 2 husbands have died. I am HIV positive, poor, and hungry. I have no choice but to once again sell myself to men, even to priests. My children are hungry, don't you see?
HIV is an enormous social stigma in African society. Women often hesitate to be tested for the disease for fear of the discrimination that comes with being HIV positive. Many older women who may not even have HIV themselves are shunned for taking care of AIDS orphans and are denied social and economic support.
I lost everything. My husband died, my parents deserted me, my son lives with relatives. I don't even have money to pay for food. It's cold and wet, I feel ill and weak, I'm hungry. Isn't a family supposed to support you during times of hardship? My family threw me away like a broken toy. But I am a human being, am I not?
At the end of 2003, Sub-Saharan Africa was home to 95% of the world's AIDS orphans, over 12 million children who lost at least one parent to the disease. AIDS has dramatically reshaped the way that African families are functioning, as the highest mortality rates occur for people between the ages of 15 and 39. This pattern has led to a rapidly diminishing generation of parents, whose children are now being raised by grandparents or other extended family. Due to the sexual transmission of HIV, once one parent contracts the disease, it is highly likely that the other parent will fall sick as well. As children lose parents and guardians, they are forced to take on overwhelming responsibilities such as earning income, producing food, and caring for siblings and other sick or needy family members. Children become very vulnerable as soon as a parent falls sick with AIDS, often suffering emotional and physical neglect long before the parent dies. Orphans' access to basic necessities such as food, shelter, clothing, and healthcare are often severely limited, and they are much more likely to suffer from malnutrition than children whose parents are still able to take care of them. Also, many orphans suffer from the stigma that surrounds AIDS, shunned as they grieve loved ones who died of the disease. They are frequently assumed to have the disease themselves. These children are often denied schooling and healthcare, and even property or inheritance that would have otherwise been handed down to them from their parents. AIDS has also caused a significant drop in school attendance rates. Children, especially girls, are often pulled out of school in order to take care of sick family members. In many cases, families with reduced incomes due to AIDS cannot afford to send children to school, and in other cases, children are unable to attend because they are HIV positive themselves. Overall, AIDS is forcing millions of African children to cope with responsibilities and situations far beyond their years, and is causing millions more to suffer and die. The future of Africa depends on local, national, and international efforts to promote HIV prevention through education, poverty reduction, and the expansion of women's opportunities and human rights, as well as treatment for current HIV-positive victims. If a constant, dedicated effort is made over the next decades, the course of sub-Saharan AIDS could be dramatically altered. Some areas have already had some degree of success in combating the virus, most notably the country of Uganda. Uganda suffered from a 15% HIV prevalence rate in the early 90s, but managed to lower the rate to 4.1% by 2003. Uganda's government has been very honest about the risk of HIV, as opposed to other parts of Africa where AIDS is still very much a taboo subject. Through media campaigns and AIDS education programs, Uganda's political openness has raised AIDS awareness, driven away disease-related stigma, and involved Ugandan citizens in the fight against AIDS. Uganda is succeeding because it has educated its people and has mobilized them against the disease. This feeling of brotherhood is communicated through the Tusana proverb, Batho ke batho ka batho, or people are people through people. Effectively, a person is only fully human through his or her relationships with others. The African people are following this maxim as they help one another through the crisis. Grandmothers caring for orphans, and community centers feeding and educating children and teenagers. If the resilience of the people in Uganda can be replicated in other hard-hit countries, then there may be hope for an AIDS-free Africa in the future.
I am going to die, but until then I want to live my life. I don't look backwards. The future is important. I have 3 wishes: a family, free antiretroviral drugs for women in Africa, and that more people would speak openly about AIDS.
Ngiphela amafutha esibani sami sihlala sivuta vuta vuta Ngisizene ngamafutha esibani sami sihlala sivuta vuta vuta Ngiphela amafutha esibani sami sihlala sivuta vuta vuta Ngisizene ngamafutha esibani sami sihlala sivuta vuta